Rain? It's not just water falling from the sky. It's a signal, a warning. Each drop brings it closer. It wasn't always like this. I used to enjoy the rain. I found comfort in the rhythm of it hitting the roof, in the way it washed the streets clean. It felt safe. That was before everything changed. Back then, I lived in a small town surrounded by woods. It wasn't perfect, but it was home. People knew your name, waved when they passed by, and shared the kind of gossip that seemed harmless enough. Life was simple, predictable, until that storm. I was fixing a broken fence when the rain started. Nothing unusual, just one of those summer storms that come out of nowhere. I thought I'd finish the job before it really came down, but then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a deer or maybe a stray dog, but it wasn't. It stood taller than any man I'd ever seen, its limbs too long, its movements too wrong. The figure stops, barely visible, just a shadow against the gray backdrop of the storm. I blink and it's gone. I told myself it was the rain playing tricks on me. The way water blurs and bends what you think you see. But deep down I knew better. That was the first time. The first time it watched me. I tried to forget about it, to write it off as a moment of paranoia. Days turned into weeks and the memory should have faded. But every time it rained, I felt it. Not just in the woods, but closer. As I walked through the town, my raincoat pulled tight around me as another storm brew. I look over my shoulder, the streets eerily empty. The rainstorms became more frequent, heavier. At first, it was little things. Shadows that moved when they shouldn't have, the feeling of eyes on me when no one was there. Then people started disappearing. I picked up a newspaper from a drenched doorstep. The headline reads, "Missing. Second resident vanishes in 3 weeks." My expression hardened. No one talked about it openly, but everyone knew. People would vanish, leaving behind nothing but their footprints in the mud. The only common thread? The rain. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was connected, that what I saw wasn't just in my head. So I started digging. I've always been good at finding stories, uncovering what others miss. But this wasn't a story. It was something darker. I sat at my desk, surrounded by clippings, photos, and hastily written notes. I scanned through articles on my laptop. The locals had their theories. Some said it was a curse, others blamed the forest or even wild animals. But one name kept coming up, the Rain Watcher. They called it a spirit, a creature bound to the storms, a hunter. It was said to punish those who strayed too far from home when the rain came, a guardian or a judge depending on who you asked. I spoke with an elderly man in a cluttered shop filled with trinkets and charms. The man's voice was low and gravelly. The rain brings more than just floods. It brings judgment. Mark my words, boy. Don't go looking for what you don't want to find. The elderly man advised. I should have listened, but I didn't. I couldn't. The patterns were too clear to ignore. It wasn't random. Every storm had its victim, and it was closing in. I thought I could find answers. I thought if I understood it, I could stop it. But it doesn't work that way. Once it starts watching you, it never stops. I couldn't let it go. It wasn't just the fear of what I had seen, it was the questions it left behind. Questions that festered, gnawed at me in the silence between storms. I thought I was going mad, so I went looking for answers. That's when I found the journals. The first was dated 70 years ago, written by a man named Charles Denton. His words struck me because they felt familiar. He described the same feeling I had, the eyes, the presence, the shadow just beyond reach. He wrote about hearing footsteps in the rain when no one else was around. His final entry simply read, "It knows my name." Each journal told the same story. Different names, different places, but always the same pattern. It always began with the rain. They would see it first in the woods or out of the corner of their eye. Then it would move closer. Each storm brought it nearer until none of them ever escaped. Their words just stopped, like they had vanished mid-thought, and none of their bodies were ever found. No graves, no evidence, just claw marks and footprints, the kind no human could leave behind. I thought finding these journals would help, that they'd give me some kind of answer, but they didn't. They only confirmed what I already feared. Whatever this thing is, it's been hunting people for generations. And now, it was hunting me. It was just another storm, or so I told myself. I had been trying to distract myself with work, but my thoughts kept drifting to those journals, to the warnings I didn't want to believe. At first, I thought it was just the rain hitting the glass. But the sound wasn't random. It was deliberate. Tap, 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 like someone or something was knocking. The streetlights barely cut through the rain. For a moment, I thought I saw movement, a shadow darting past, quick and silent. My gut told me not to open the window, but curiosity got the better of me. Nothing, just rain. But as I closed the window, I caught it, a sound I'll never forget. Breathing, deep, heavy, slow, and it wasn't coming from inside. It wasn't just a story anymore. It had found me. I didn't want to go, but I needed someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. Mira was an old friend, someone I trusted, but even as I told her everything, I could see the doubt in her eyes. She thought it was stress, maybe sleep deprivation. She talked about trauma and how the mind can play tricks on you when it's overwhelmed. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But then, it started raining. I couldn't help it. The sound of the rain made my skin crawl. I locked every door, every window, and Mira just watched me like I'd completely lost it. But then she saw it too. There was no wind, nothing that should have moved the tree like that. Mira stopped writing and just stared. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She didn't say it, but I could see it in her face. She knew something was wrong. She didn't believe me before, but now, she wasn't so sure. I went back to where it all began. My father had spent years warning me about things I laughed off as superstition. Stories about the woods, about the rain. I thought they were just tales to keep a curious kid from wandering too far. But now I wasn't so sure. He had been keeping records, just like I had. But his were different. He wasn't just documenting disappearances. He was studying it. He called it the Watcher. He wrote that it wasn't just drawn to the rain, it needed it. He believed it grew stronger with every storm, feeding off the fear it created. He said it wasn't natural, that it wasn't meant to exist. Stay inside when it rains, never go near the woods, and if you see it, don't run. Running only makes it worse. I didn't listen then, but now his words were all I had. It started like any other storm, but this time I knew it was different. I could feel it watching closer than ever before. It was real, all of it. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things, and it was here. I wanted to move, to hide, to do anything but stare at it. But I couldn't. It was like my body wouldn't listen, like it had me under some kind of spell. It didn't make a sound. It didn't have to. The silence said enough. The storm came fast, as if the sky itself was warning me. The wind howled through the trees, and the rain hammered the roof of my childhood home. But I wasn't inside. I was out in the woods, running for my life. I thought I could outrun it, but I was wrong. It wasn't just fast, it was relentless. I could hear it closing in, its footsteps heavy, deliberate. Every time I looked back, the shadows seemed darker, deeper, like it was bending the night around itself. I could feel it, even when I couldn't see it. The weight of its presence pressed against me, suffocating. I didn't have a plan, just the rifle and the faint hope that it might slow the thing down. I didn't think, I just raised the rifle and fired. The shot echoed through the woods, and for a moment, it stopped. I thought I'd done it. I thought it was over. But then it moved. It healed, as if the bullet was nothing more than an inconvenience. That was when I realized I couldn't kill it. Not with a gun, not with anything I had. I thought I was safe, at least for a moment. The walls felt solid, the door strong. But the truth was, it didn't need to break down walls to get to me. It already had me where it wanted. My father had spent years trying to understand it, to stop it. He had tracked every storm, every disappearance, and every sighting. But there was one thing he hadn't told me. Something he had kept hidden, even from himself. It wasn't random. It wasn't just hunting anyone. It was hunting us. My family. My father had seen it too. He had spent his life trying to break the cycle, to keep it away from me. But it hadn't worked. He failed, and now it was my turn. It didn't just want to kill us. It wanted our fear. It fed on it, grew stronger with every scream, every moment of panic. And I had been giving it exactly what it wanted. If fear was what it wanted, then I had to find another way. I couldn't run anymore. I had to face it. My father's notes were detailed, precise. He had studied it long enough to know its patterns, its weaknesses. It was strong, but it wasn't invincible. If I could trap it, even for a moment, I might have a chance. It needed the rain, but it also needed me. It wouldn't stop until it had what it wanted. So I gave it exactly that. It was here. I could feel it, like the air had been sucked out of the room. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows growing darker, deeper. It didn't rush. It didn't need to. It knew I had nowhere to go. I thought it would fall for the bait, that it would step into the trap without hesitation. But it was smarter than I realized. The shot wasn't enough. It never was. But it gave me the time I needed. I thought I had done it. I thought I had won. But then it moved. It was stronger than I ever imagined. The trap held, but just barely. And then, it looked at me. You can't run forever. I had failed. Everything my father tried, everything I thought I could do, it wasn't enough. I thought it was over, but instead of finishing me, it stopped. It turned and walked away, leaving a mark on the wall behind it. The camera shows deep claw marks etched into the wooden wall. The words are jagged but clear. You can't run forever. It didn't kill me. It didn't need to. It had already won. It knew I would never stop running, never stop looking over my shoulder. And that's exactly what it wanted. I don't know how long I stayed on that floor. Time stopped making sense. The creature was gone, but the silence it left behind was louder than anything I'd ever heard. My body ached, every muscle screaming, but it wasn't just the pain. It was the weight of knowing that it let me live. It didn't need to kill me. That's what I finally understood. The fear it left behind, that was the real weapon. Every time I closed my eyes, I couldn't stay here. It had found me, and it would come back. The house, the one place that had ever felt safe, was a beacon now. If I stayed, it would come again. And next time, it might not leave me alive. It wasn't just a house. It was my childhood, my family, every memory that mattered. But it had become something else, something dangerous. Destroying it felt like losing everything all over again. But I didn't have a choice. If I left it standing, it would always be waiting for me. Always. It wasn't just a home. It was my last connection to a life I could never get back. But if burning it down meant keeping it away, I'd do it 100 times over. I couldn't leave without warning her. Mira had seen too much, and if it couldn't have me, it might go after her. I owed her that much. I told her everything, what it was, what it wanted, what it would do if it found her. I begged her to stay away, to leave town, to forget I ever existed. She didn't believe me. I don't blame her. How could she? But the fear in her eyes told me she wouldn't ignore the warning completely. That was enough. It had to be. I tried to rebuild, to start over, but no matter how far I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't done with me. Every night, I dreamed of rain, of footsteps in the dark, of eyes watching me from the shadows. The sun was shining, the air was warm, but that feeling was still there, just beneath the surface, like the calm before a storm. I told myself it was just a passing storm, that it didn't mean anything, but deep down, I knew better. The rain was coming, and so was it. You've heard my story. Now I need to know, what would you do if it came for you? Would you run, or would you fight? Tell me. Maybe your answer will save the next storm's target.